She had nothing left but a handful of coins and a mother's love. But fate placed someone unexpected behind her, a man whose one question changed both their lives forever. It was one of those days when life felt too heavy to carry, the kind of day where even the air feels like a burden. The grocery store was alive with noise, the hum of conversation, the rhythmic beep of scanners, the rustling of shopping bags. Children laughed in the candy aisle, couples debated brands of cereal, and the smell of fresh bread floated from the bakery section. But for Lena, standing alone in the baby aisle, the world had gone silent. It was as if she existed inside a bubble, just her baby, and the quiet ache of exhaustion. Her hands trembled as she picked up the last can of formula on the shelf. She flipped it over, reading the label even though she'd read it 1,000 times before. Same brand, same price. But today, the price felt heavier than ever. Her baby, Noah, whimpered softly against her chest, his tiny fingers gripping her worn t-shirt. She rocked him gently, whispering, "Just a little longer, sweetheart. Mommy's got you." Her voice cracked on the last word. She hadn't eaten properly in 2 days, trying to make what little food she had stretched for both of them. Her rent was due, the electricity bill was overdue, and the few dollars left in her purse were all that stood between her and nothing. She opened her small handbag and looked inside. A few crumpled bills, some loose coins, and an old photo of her and Noah's father, taken before he left. Before everything fell apart, Lena counted the money slowly, once, twice, 3 times. Each coin clicked against the counter of her palm, like a countdown to defeat. When she realized it was just enough for the formula, she exhaled shakily. It wasn't relief. It was survival. She made her way to the checkout line, her shoes squeaking faintly on the polished floor. The line was long, and every minute that passed felt like forever. She could feel the curious glances, people looking at her messy hair, her faded jeans, the baby clinging to her chest. She lowered her head, pretending not to notice. When it was finally her turn, the cashier, a young woman with kind eyes, smiled politely. "Did you find everything you needed today?" Lena nodded, though her throat tightened. "Yes, just this." She placed the can on the counter like it was made of glass. The cashier scanned it. The screen blinked. $22.49. The sound of that number felt louder than the beeps around her. Lena reached into her purse and began pulling out the coins. Her fingers were stiff from the cold. They fumbled with each piece. One coin rolled off the counter and clinked onto the floor. She crouched to pick it up, her cheeks burning. Behind her, someone sighed impatiently. She mumbled an apology, her voice barely audible. "Sorry, just a second." The cashier watched silently as Lena placed the coins in small piles, nickels, dimes, quarters, then unfolded her last few dollar bills. She counted carefully, her lips moving with each number. $22.49, she said at last, placing the final coin down. "That should cover it." The cashier hesitated, glancing at the line of people behind Lena. But before she could respond, a man's deep voice spoke from behind. "It's fine. Take your time." Lena froze. She turned slightly, her eyes meeting a stranger's, tall, well-dressed, with neatly combed hair and a sharp navy suit that looked completely out of place in this modest grocery store. His tie was loosened, and he held a phone in one hand, a shopping basket in the other. Ethan Cole. If you looked him up, you'd find headlines calling him a visionary, a genius, one of the youngest billionaires in the city. But to Lena, in that moment, he was just a man standing in line, and the way he looked at her wasn't with judgment, but something softer, something human. Lena quickly turned back, embarrassed. She didn't want pity. She didn't want anyone to see how close she was to falling apart. The cashier bagged the formula slowly, handing it over with a small nod. "Here you go, ma'am." Lena's eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. "Thank you," she whispered. She adjusted Noah on her hip and reached for the bag. But just as she turned to leave, she heard the man behind her speak again, quietly, almost to himself. "No one should have to count coins for milk," he murmured. Lena paused for a fraction of a second, her heart thudding, but she didn't look back. She couldn't. She pushed through the glass doors into the parking lot, the cool evening air hitting her face. The streetlights flickered to life, casting a golden glow over the asphalt. She clutched the bag tightly, holding Noah closer, whispering, "We made it, baby. We're okay. We're okay." But deep down, she knew they weren't. Not really. Inside the store, Ethan watched her leave through the window. He should have been on a conference call right now, discussing stocks, mergers, profit margins, things that usually consumed him. But his attention stayed on the young mother disappearing into the night. Something about her felt familiar, not her face, but the weight she carried. It reminded him of his own mother years ago, working 2 jobs just to afford food after his father left. He didn't even realize he was holding his breath until the door shut behind her. "Sir," the cashier said, breaking his trance, "are you ready to check out?" Ethan blinked, glancing down at his basket. He'd come to buy bottled water and snacks for a late meeting. But now, those things felt meaningless. "Yes," he said finally, pulling out his wallet. But even as he paid, his mind was elsewhere, replaying the image of that young woman, her trembling hands, her baby's tiny face, the sound of the coins clinking on the counter. As he left the store, he spotted her again, standing by a broken streetlight, waiting for the bus. Her hair blew gently in the wind, her arm wrapped protectively around her baby. For a moment, Ethan thought of approaching her, offering help, saying something. But he hesitated. He didn't want to insult her pride. So instead, he watched as the bus arrived, doors hissing open, and she climbed aboard. As it pulled away, Ethan found himself whispering, almost unconsciously, "I hope you make it." He stood there for a long time, staring down the empty street. And though he didn't know it yet, that moment, that single act of quiet compassion, was about to change both of their lives forever. Ethan stood there, frozen for a moment, the sound of the automatic doors still echoing after Lena stepped out into the cold evening air. The people behind him moved on quickly, scanning groceries, chatting about dinner, tapping on phones. But for him, the world had gone still. He had seen thousands of faces in his life, employees, investors, journalists, but hers lingered. The way she avoided everyone's eyes, the tremble in her lips when she whispered to her baby, the fragile hope in her hands as she laid down those coins. She wasn't just broke. She was broken. And Ethan hated that word, broken. It was something money could never quite fix. He ran a hand through his hair and tried to shake the feeling off. But it clung to him. His phone buzzed again, a meeting reminder. His assistant's voice appeared on the screen. "Conference call in 5 minutes, sir. The board's waiting." Normally, Ethan never missed a call. He was the kind of man who didn't let emotions interfere with business. He had built an empire from the ground up, turned small startups into global names, and learned to keep his heart out of every decision. But right now, business didn't seem to matter. He could still see the image of Lena at the counter, her shaking hands, the way she bit her lip, trying not to cry when her baby fussed. The sound of the coins hitting the counter kept replaying in his mind like a haunting rhythm. He grabbed his card from the cashier, mumbled a distracted "thank you," and turned toward the exit. Outside, the evening had deepened into twilight. The parking lot glowed under the flickering lights, cars pulling in and out, engines humming softly. And there she was, the young mother from the line, standing at the far end of the sidewalk, rocking her baby gently, whispering to him as the wind tugged at her hair. She wasn't asking for help. She wasn't begging anyone to notice. But Ethan couldn't stop noticing. He hesitated for a moment, then took a breath and stepped forward. "Excuse me," he said softly, his voice carrying just enough to reach her. Lena turned, startled. Her first instinct was fear, not of danger, but of shame. The kind that comes when you think someone's about to remind you how little you have. "Yes?" she asked, clutching Noah closer. Ethan suddenly felt awkward, out of place. He wasn't used to not knowing what to say. "I saw what happened back there," he began, his tone gentle. "You shouldn't have to count coins for something like that." Lena blinked, unsure how to respond. "It's fine," she said quickly. "We're fine." But she wasn't fine, and they both knew it. Her voice wavered, her hands trembling slightly as she adjusted the baby's blanket. Ethan took a small step closer, careful not to startle her. "Look," he said. "I know this might sound strange coming from a stranger, but please, let me help." Her reaction was immediate. She shook her head sharply. "No, thank you. We don't take charity." Her words were calm but laced with pride, a quiet, desperate pride that came from having no one else to depend on but yourself. Ethan raised his hand slightly, as if to show he meant no harm. "It's not charity," he said softly. "Just kindness." But Lena's walls were already up. She adjusted her bag, avoiding his eyes. "Kindness turns into pity, and pity's not something I need," she said, voice breaking slightly. She turned to walk away. For a moment, Ethan just stood there, the wind tugging at his coat, the sound of her footsteps fading. He felt an ache deep in his chest, one he hadn't felt since he was a kid. He remembered his mother, a waitress who used to come home late every night, smelling of coffee and exhaustion. He remembered the nights she'd count pennies on the kitchen table, whispering prayers under her breath, pretending he didn't see her wipe away tears. He remembered swearing he'd make enough money, so she'd never have to cry again. And he did. But in that moment, watching Lena disappear down the street with her baby, Ethan realized something painful. All the money in the world couldn't erase the look of quiet desperation he saw in her eyes. He took a few steps after her, then stopped himself. He didn't even know her name. He didn't know where she was going, or if she'd be safe. But something deep inside him, something that had been asleep for a long time, whispered that this wasn't the end of their story. Back in his car, he sat for a long time, the city lights flickering on the windshield. He should have driven away, gone back to his glass office tower, returned to his world of numbers and deals. But he couldn't. Not yet. He opened his laptop and pulled up the grocery store's management contact info, the kind of data only someone like him could access with a single phone call. "Hi, this is Ethan Cole," he said after a moment. "I was in your store earlier. There was a young woman, dark hair, carrying a baby. She might have paid in coins for baby formula. Could you check the security footage and tell me if she left a name on the receipt?" The manager hesitated, clearly recognizing his name. Yes, Mr. Cole. Give me a few minutes." Ethan tapped his fingers against the steering wheel, his reflection in the glass looking more thoughtful than he'd seen in years. Why was he doing this? He wasn't sure. Maybe because for once, someone had reminded him what struggle looked like. Not the kind you see in boardrooms, but the kind that keeps you awake at night wondering if you can feed your child. The manager's voice broke his thoughts. "Her name's on the loyalty system. Lena. Lena Carter." Ethan repeated the name softly. Lena. It sounded familiar, like a note in a song he'd heard before. He hung up and leaned back in his seat, staring out the window at the city skyline. "Lena Carter," he whispered again, the name lingering on his tongue. He didn't know what he would do next, only that he couldn't just drive away and forget her, because something about the way she looked at her baby, the fierce love behind the exhaustion, had shaken him to his core. And for the first time in years, Ethan Cole, billionaire, CEO, man who had everything, felt something he couldn't buy. He felt purpose. That night, Ethan Cole couldn't sleep. Not even the soft hum of the city below his penthouse could drown out the image of that young mother, her trembling hands, her soft voice, and the way she'd whispered to her baby, as if he were the only thing keeping her alive. He had seen poverty before. He'd written checks for charity galas, funded shelters, donated millions to causes he barely remembered. But what he saw that evening wasn't poverty on paper. It was human, real, breathing, and it broke something inside him. He tossed in bed, staring at the ceiling, the glow from the city lights flickering across the room. He tried to think about business, tomorrow's board meeting, the new merger proposal, but every thought circled back to her. Lena. The way she said, "We don't take charity," echoed in his head, over and over, like a quiet defiance. She wasn't just surviving. She was fighting to keep her dignity, even when the world had given her none. By morning, Ethan knew he couldn't ignore it anymore. "Find her," he told his assistant James, as soon as he stepped into the office. James blinked. "Sir, the woman from the grocery store," Ethan said. "I need her name, her story, everything." It wasn't a usual request from the CEO of Cole Industries. But James knew better than to question him. Within an hour, he returned, holding a thin folder. "She used to work for one of our companies," James said quietly. "Cole Media Group, 3 years ago. Administrative assistant." Ethan frowned. "Used to." "She was laid off during the budget restructuring." James hesitated, lowering his voice. "She was pregnant at the time." Ethan's heart sank. He remembered that round of layoffs. Hundreds of names on a spreadsheet. Numbers to balance. Targets to hit. He hadn't even looked at the faces. He swallowed hard. What happened after that? James handed him the file. "According to the records, she filed for assistance. It looks like it never came through. She's been working odd jobs since then. Grocery stores, cleaning services, temp work." Ethan stared at the file in silence. Each page felt like a slap. He had always prided himself on being efficient, cutting costs, raising profits, keeping the company strong. But now, reading about Lena, he realized what those decisions really meant. Behind every cut, there was a life. Behind every budget adjustment, there was someone who'd have to count coins to buy baby formula. And Lena was one of them. He leaned back in his chair, running a hand over his face. Guilt pressed heavy on his chest, not just for her, but for every person he'd unknowingly hurt with the stroke of a pen. "Do we have a current address?" he asked quietly. James nodded. "It's on file." "But sir, what exactly are you planning to do?" Ethan didn't answer. He just closed the folder, grabbed his coat, and walked out. The city outside buzzed with life, people rushing to work, coffee in hand, faces buried in phones. But Ethan wasn't one of them today. He wasn't the billionaire CEO in a rush to close a deal. He was just a man trying to make something right. He drove through narrow streets lined with old apartment buildings, the kind of places he'd stopped noticing years ago. When he pulled up outside the address, his chest tightened. The building was run down, paint peeling, broken steps, a flickering light over the doorway. He could hear a baby crying faintly from one of the upper floors. Lena's baby. Ethan hesitated for a moment before stepping out of the car. He didn't even know what he was going to say. What could a man like him possibly say to someone like her? "I'm sorry I ruined your life," didn't seem like enough. He climbed the stairs slowly, his footsteps echoing in the narrow hallway. The air smelled faintly of detergent and old wood. At apartment 3B, he stopped. The door was cracked open slightly, and from inside, he heard the soft sound of a lullaby. "Sure, Noah. Mommy's here," Lena whispered, her voice tired but tender. He hesitated, then knocked gently. The lullaby stopped. A pause. Then her cautious voice. "Who is it?" Ethan cleared his throat. "It's Ethan. From yesterday. The grocery store." The silence stretched. Then the door opened, just a little. Her face appeared in the gap, surprise flickering across her tired eyes. "What are you doing here?" she asked softly. I found out who you were," he said honestly. "You used to work for one of my companies." Her expression hardened. "So what? You came to apologize for firing me." Ethan exhaled. "Yes, actually I did." That made her pause. She opened the door a little wider, enough for him to see the small, dim apartment behind her, a couch with a few toys scattered on it, a baby bottle on the table, and Noah sleeping in a blanket beside it. He took it all in silently. It wasn't just modest. It was survival. "I didn't know," he said finally, voice low. "I didn't know what those layoffs did to you, to people like you. I made those decisions thinking they were just numbers. But they weren't." Lena crossed her arms, defensive. "What do you want from me, Mr. Cole?" He looked at her, really looked at her. The exhaustion, the strength, the quiet pain. "I want to make it right," he said simply. She let out a dry laugh. "You can't buy back years of struggling, Ethan. You can't erase hunger with a check." He nodded slowly. "You're right. I can't." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The sound of Noah's soft breathing filled the silence. Then Ethan reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small business card. "I'm not offering charity," he said, "but I am offering a chance. Come back to work. Not as an assistant, as an operations coordinator. Double your old salary. Benefits. Stability." Lena's breath caught. "Why?" she whispered. He smiled faintly, his eyes soft. Because sometimes, the people we overlook end up teaching us what really matters. She didn't answer. She just stood there, holding the card, torn between pride and disbelief. And for the first time in years, Ethan didn't rush. He just waited, patient, sincere, hoping she'd let him prove that this time, he wasn't walking away. When Lena opened her small apartment door and saw him standing there, the billionaire from the grocery store, she froze. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The hallway light flickered between them, catching the sharp lines of his suit and the soft exhaustion in her eyes. In her arms, baby Noah stirred, as if sensing the tension. "Ethan," she whispered, her voice trembling. "What are you doing here?" He looked different now. Not like the man from the magazines. Not like the CEO who owned half the city. His hair was slightly messy, his eyes tired, and for the first time, he looked human. "I came to say I'm sorry," he said quietly, "and to ask, why didn't you tell me?" Lena frowned, confused. "Tell you what?" "That you were struggling," he said. His voice cracked just a little. "That you worked for me once. That my company, failed you." Her jaw tightened. She held Noah closer, as if to shield him from the world. "You think it would have mattered?" she asked softly. "People like you don't care about people like me. You don't even see us." Ethan flinched at her words. They hit harder than he expected. He looked down, his voice low. "You're right. I didn't. I've spent my whole life in boardrooms and private jets, making decisions about people I never actually looked at. But I see you now, Lena. I really do." The silence between them felt heavy, raw and real. Then Ethan reached into his coat pocket and handed her a white envelope. "There's enough in here for you and Noah to start over," he said softly. "A new home, a job, whatever you need. No strings attached." Lena stared at the envelope as if it were something dangerous. Her lips parted, but no words came out. Finally, she shook her head. "I can't take this." "Why not?" he asked, genuinely puzzled. "Because I'm not a charity case," she said. Her voice broke, but her spine stayed straight. "I don't want your pity. I just want to stand on my own." Ethan studied her for a moment, the stubborn pride, the quiet dignity in her eyes. And something inside him shifted. He took a step closer. "Then let me make it right another way." Her brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" "I want you to come work for me again," he said. Lena blinked, completely thrown. "Work for you? Ethan, I don't." He raised a hand gently, cutting her off. "Not as an assistant. I'm starting something new, a charity foundation. Real help for real people. And I want you to run it." Lena laughed softly, almost bitterly. "You can't be serious. I'm a single mom with no fancy degree. I barely get through the day." "That's exactly why I want you," he said. His tone was steady, sincere. "You know what it's like to struggle, to choose between rent and baby formula, to keep going when everything's against you. You understand what people actually need, Lena. That's something no business school could ever teach." Her eyes filled with tears she didn't want to shed. "You really mean it?" she whispered. "I do," Ethan said, his voice gentle. "And not because I pity you, because I believe in you." She looked away, blinking fast. The truth was, no one had said those words to her in years. Not since before Noah was born. Not since life got hard and everyone stopped seeing her for who she was. "I don't know what to say," she murmured. "Say yes," he said with a small, hopeful smile. "Say you'll let me make things right. Not just for you, but for others like you." Lena's fingers tightened around the envelope. She didn't open it, but she didn't give it back either. "Let me think about it," she said quietly. He nodded, relief flickering in his eyes. "That's all I ask." Ethan glanced around her tiny apartment, peeling wallpaper, an old sofa, a cracked photo frame on the wall. On the table sat a single baby bottle and a stack of unpaid bills. He didn't say anything about them, but the sight carved a deep ache into his chest. "You're stronger than anyone I've ever met," he said finally. "I wish I'd realized sooner." Lena looked at him, really looked, and for the first time, she saw something different in his face. Not arrogance, not pity, but guilt, regret, humanity. "People change," she said softly. But most don't come back to fix what they broke. He smiled faintly. Maybe I'm one of the few trying to. At that, Noah let out a small coo from her arms, and both of them turned toward him instinctively. Ethan's gaze softened as he watched the tiny boy reach for his mother's necklace. May I? Ethan asked quietly, gesturing to hold him. Lena hesitated, but then, slowly, she nodded. Ethan held Noah carefully, his large hands almost trembling. The baby looked up at him with curious eyes, innocent, unbothered, pure. Ethan chuckled softly. Hey there, little man, he whispered. You don't know it yet, but your mom's the bravest person I've ever met. Lena's throat tightened. Watching Ethan hold her son stirred something unexpected in her chest. Not love, not yet, but a strange warmth. A sense that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't as alone as she thought. Ethan handed Noah back gently, his expression thoughtful. I'll come by tomorrow, he said, to talk more about the foundation, if you'll let me. Lena nodded, still unsure if she should believe him, but part of her wanted to. As he turned to leave, she said softly, Ethan? He looked back. Why are you doing this? He paused, his answer simple but sincere. Because yesterday, I saw the kind of courage money can't buy, and I realized I've spent too long chasing the wrong things. When the door closed behind him, Lena stood there in silence, her heart heavy, but strangely lighter at the same time. For the first time in years, hope, fragile and flickering, began to find its way back into her world. And outside, as Ethan stepped into his car, he glanced back at her window one last time, whispering to himself, maybe this time, I can finally do something that matters. Months later, the world finally saw the story that had begun in silence at a grocery store checkout line. The headlines glowed across every screen. CEO launches foundation to support single mothers nationwide. The stage was set beneath soft golden lights. Reporters filled the room, cameras flashing, microphones clicking. But in the middle of it all stood two people who never expected to be there together. Ethan Cole, the billionaire once known only for numbers and profits, and Lena Hart, the woman who'd once counted her last coins for baby formula. Lena stood beside Ethan, Noah nestled in her arms, his tiny hand clutching the corner of her blazer. Her heart pounded, not with fear this time, but with something new, pride. She looked out at the sea of faces, the lights glimmering like stars. For years, she'd watched other people change the world from far away. Now she was part of something that actually mattered. Ethan stepped to the microphone, his voice calm but filled with emotion. 6 months ago, he began, I saw a mother standing at a checkout counter, counting her last coins to buy milk for her baby. That moment changed everything I thought I knew about success. The crowd fell silent. Cameras zoomed in, but Ethan didn't look at them. He looked at Lena. I realized that behind every business statistic, every profit margin, there are people like her. People who deserve a hand, not a handout. Today, we're here to make sure no parent has to choose between feeding their child and keeping the lights on. Applause filled the room. Lena's eyes blurred with tears she didn't bother to hide. When it was her turn to speak, she took a deep breath and stepped forward. Noah squirmed in her arms, making the audience smile. She leaned toward the microphone and said softly, 6 months ago, I thought my life was over. I thought no one saw me. But one person did, and that changed everything. Her voice steadied as she continued. This foundation isn't just about money. It's about hope. About remembering that even the smallest act of kindness can change someone's story. I'm living proof of that. The applause grew louder, but Lena barely heard it. Her eyes found Ethan's again, and for a moment the noise faded away. After the event, when the reporters drifted off and the cameras dimmed, Ethan and Lena stepped outside together. The evening sky was painted in orange and rose gold hues. The crowd waiting beyond the barricades cheered when they appeared. Somewhere near the front stood a young mother holding her own baby. Her clothes were simple, her face tired, but her eyes glowed with hope. She lifted her child slightly as if to say, maybe we'll be okay too. Lena's chest tightened. She reached up and waved to the woman. Ethan glanced at her, smiling. You see that? He whispered. That's why this matters. Lena nodded. It's more than a foundation now. It's a promise. They walked through the crowd, people shaking their hands, thanking them. A few mothers cried as they hugged Lena, telling her their stories, how they'd lost jobs, fought through nights without sleep, or walked miles to food banks. She listened to every one of them, holding their hands as if they were old friends. Ethan watched quietly from a few feet away. In that moment, he realized he had never felt more alive, not during his biggest business deal, not even when his company went public. This was different. This was real. When they finally reached the car, Ethan opened the door for her, but Lena paused, turning back to take one last look at the cheering crowd. The setting sun glowed on her face, catching in the curls of baby Noah's hair. She whispered, almost to herself, "We're going to be okay now." Ethan smiled softly. "You already are." As they drove away, the city lights blinked on one by one, but inside the car, there was a quiet peace. Noah slept soundly in his car seat, his tiny breaths filling the silence. Lena glanced at Ethan. "You know," she said gently, "you could have just written a check that day and walked away. Most people would have." He kept his eyes on the road, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Maybe I was tired of being most people." Lena laughed softly. "You don't make things simple, do you?" "Simple doesn't change the world," he replied. They drove in comfortable silence for a while, the hum of the engine steady and calm. Then Lena spoke again, her voice thoughtful. "You know, sometimes I still think about that day. The coins, the checkout counter. I was so embarrassed." Ethan turned to her briefly. "Don't be. That moment saved me as much as it saved you." She raised an eyebrow. "Saved you?" He nodded slowly. "I was successful but empty. You and Noah reminded me what purpose looks like. I used to think wealth was measured by what I owned. Now I know it's measured by what I give." Lena smiled, not out of gratitude, but understanding. "Then I guess we both found something worth keeping." Outside the window, the first stars began to appear. The world felt quiet, balanced, whole. Months passed. The foundation grew rapidly. Billboards appeared across cities with a simple message. No mother left behind, the Heart-Coal Foundation. Lena spent her days meeting families, setting up shelters, and designing programs that gave single parents not just money, but dignity, childcare services, job training, emotional support. Ethan stood beside her every step of the way, not as a savior, but as a partner. People began to whisper about them, the billionaire and the single mom who changed lives together. Some called it a miracle. Others called it fate. But to Lena, it was something quieter, a reminder that kindness doesn't need to be loud to be powerful. One evening, after a long day at the foundation's new headquarters, Lena stood by the window, Noah asleep in her arms. Ethan walked up beside her, 2 cups of coffee in hand. "Tired?" he asked with a grin. "Exhausted," she admitted, "but happy." He handed her a cup. "That's a good kind of tired." She looked out at the city skyline, lights twinkling like dreams finally waking up. "You know, sometimes I still can't believe this is my life." Ethan leaned on the window frame, his voice soft. "Believe it. You earned every part of it." Lena turned to him and smiled, the kind of smile that said thank you without needing words. Outside, the world kept moving, cars rushing, people laughing, life unfolding. But for that one quiet moment, everything felt still. Because sometimes, miracles don't come with magic or fame. They come quietly, when someone chooses to care. And somewhere deep in her heart, Lena knew this was only the beginning. Sometimes, life gives us miracles in the most unexpected places, like a grocery store line, or a stranger's kindness. Remember, compassion costs nothing but can change everything. If you felt this story in your heart, make sure to hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you never miss another story like this.